When my father died, my brothers inherited his $18 million empire. Mansions, yachts, cars, everything. Me? I got a small, dusty envelope. They laughed at me right there in the lawyer's office. I took it home in silence, humiliated. That night, I opened it alone. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a bank account number and one chilling line. This is for the child who was never supposed to exist. What I discovered next changed everything. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and stay with me, because what happens next will leave you speechless. The night after opening that envelope, I couldn't sleep. The numbers on that slip of paper haunted me, but at that point, I hadn't even checked the balance. It just sat there on my desk, next to an empty coffee mug, like it was waiting for me to earn the courage to look. When the phone rang early the next morning, I thought it might be the bank calling about an error or a prank. Instead, a calm female voice said, "Mr. Jack Beaumont? I'm calling from Gray & Associates, your father's legal representatives. I'm sorry to inform you that Mr. Charles Beaumont passed away 2 days ago." The words hit harder than I expected. My throat tightened, and for a moment, I couldn't answer. My father, the man who had always been a ghost in my life, was gone. I see. I finally managed to say. My voice sounded mechanical, detached, like it belonged to someone else. The woman continued. His funeral will be held at Evergreen Hills Cemetery this Friday. The family requested I reach out in case you wanted to attend. The family. That phrase stung. I wasn't part of that family, not really. I was the secret, the one born out of a quiet scandal no one dared to mention. My father's legitimate wife, Eleanor, had made sure of that. My half-brothers, Nathan and Ryan, didn't even acknowledge me as blood. Still, I thanked the woman for the information, hung up, and just sat there staring at my phone. Should I go? What would be the point? It had been nearly 6 years since I last saw my father. Our final meeting wasn't much of a conversation, more like an obligation. He came to my mother's funeral, shook my hand, said, "I'm sorry for your loss," and left before the service even ended. That was it. No phone calls, no birthdays, no visits, just silence. Yet, now that he was gone, something inside me ached. Not for him as the man I knew, but for the father I never got to have. I wanted to know why he kept me in the shadows. I wanted to see his face one last time, even if only as proof that our strange connection had really existed. That evening, I stood in my small kitchen, staring at the steam rising from a bowl of ramen noodles, and decided. I was going to the funeral. Not for them, for me. Friday came faster than I expected. The morning air carried a kind of stillness that only seems to exist around death. I put on the only suit I owned, a dark gray one I'd worn to job interviews and my mother's burial. It fit a little tighter now, but I didn't care. The cemetery was a different world. Polished black cars lined up along a marble pathway, the kind of quiet wealth that breeds entitlement. Cameramen stood outside the gates, snapping photos of the Beaumont family as they arrived. I parked my old pickup truck a block away and walked in. When I reached the crowd gathered around the coffin, I saw them, my half-brothers, Nathan and Ryan, standing beside their mother. Nathan, the eldest, looked every bit the corporate heir, sharp suit, expression carved from stone. Ryan wore dark sunglasses even though the sky was gray. Smirking like this was just another event he had to attend before cocktails. Eleanor, my stepmother, glanced at me. Her expression didn't change. Not anger, not sadness, just a faint tightening of her lips, like she'd smelled something unpleasant. Nathan's eyes met mine briefly. "Jack," he said flatly. "Yeah," I answered, unsure whether to offer a handshake. He didn't move. Ryan tilted his head and grinned. "Didn't think you'd show up." I didn't reply. There was nothing to say. The ceremony started. The priest's voice echoed over the rows of flowers and silent guests. People dabbed at their eyes with handkerchiefs, though I wasn't sure how many tears were real. I stood near the back, just watching. When the casket was lowered, I stepped forward quietly, waited until everyone else had placed their roses. Then I put mine down, a simple white flower from a grocery store. I whispered, "Goodbye, Dad," even though I wasn't sure he ever wanted to hear that word from me. As I turned to leave, I heard Ryan mutter under his breath to Nathan, "Guess he wanted to see what money he's not getting." Nathan chuckled softly. "Let him. Maybe he'll finally stop thinking he's one of us." Their voices were low, but not low enough. My stomach twisted. I wanted to say something, to tell them that I didn't care about the empire or their millions, but the truth was, part of me did. Not the money itself, but the acknowledgement it represented. I walked away before I could lose my composure. The drive back home was quiet, except for the hum of the old truck engine. I kept thinking about how the lawyer's office had sounded when the woman on the phone said, "If you wish to attend." It had been an invitation, yes, but one soaked in politeness, the kind used when addressing a stranger. I realized that to them, I had never been a son. I was an accident that never quite disappeared. But as much as I wanted to move on, something told me this wasn't over. My father's death had stirred more than just memories. It had opened a door, one I hadn't even known existed. And soon, I would walk through it. The day of the funeral stayed with me long after I drove home, but what happened at that funeral is burned into my memory forever. It wasn't just the sight of my father's coffin. It was the atmosphere of power, pride, and poison that hung over his family like a fog. Evergreen Hills Cemetery looked like a scene from an old movie that only the rich could afford to star in. The Beaumonts didn't do anything halfway, not even death. White roses lined the pathway to a marble mausoleum bearing the family name in gold letters. Even the wind seemed to whisper their legacy. I arrived early, hoping to blend in quietly. I wasn't there to make a scene. I just wanted to pay my respects and leave before anyone noticed. But people noticed immediately. A valet. Yes, they had valet parking at a funeral. Looked uncertain when I handed him the keys to my beat-up truck. "You sure you're here for Mr. Beaumont's service, sir?" he asked politely. "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. He was my father. The man blinked, then nodded quickly. "Of course, sir." But his eyes told a different story. Inside, mourners gathered beneath a canopy. The smell of expensive perfume mixed with damp earth. Reporters stood at a distance, snapping photos of black-clad guests who probably hadn't seen my father in years but were here for appearances. Then I saw them. Nathan Beaumont stood near the front, hands clasped behind his back, tall and composed like he was already the head of the family. At 40, he had my father's jawline and the same calculating stare. His suit alone probably cost more than my truck. Beside him, Ryan leaned against a limousine, sunglasses hiding eyes I knew were filled with arrogance. The youngest Beaumont heir at 29, he was famous for the kind of scandals tabloids adored: supermodel girlfriends, speeding tickets, and club fights swept under the rug. When Nathan spotted me, his posture stiffened. He murmured something to Ryan, who turned, smirked, and gave me a slow once-over. "Well, look who decided to show up," Ryan said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Ryan," I said evenly. "Nathan." Nathan's gaze didn't waver. "We didn't expect you to come." I wasn't sure I would, I admitted. But he was still my father. That last word made Eleanor, my stepmother, turn her head sharply. Her expression was ice. Dressed in a black dress and pearls, she looked like grief sculpted in marble, perfect and cold. She took a step closer. "Your presence here is unexpected," she said. "I was invited," I replied. "Invited," she repeated quietly, almost amused. "I see." Nathan cleared his throat. "It's fine, Mother. He's here. Let's not make a scene." But there already was one, even if no one said it aloud. People whispered, eyes flicking toward me, trying to place who I was, the son nobody had mentioned. The priest began the ceremony, and I stood behind everyone, far enough that I could see without being seen. The words washed over me, about love, legacy, and family, but none of them fit the truth. When it was time to lay the roses, Nathan and Ryan stepped forward first, perfect examples of solemn heirs. Eleanor followed, pausing dramatically, pressing a handkerchief to her cheek. Cameras clicked. Then came my turn. I waited until the crowd began to drift back, then approached quietly with my single white flower. My hands trembled slightly as I placed it on the coffin. "Goodbye, Dad," I whispered. "I hope you finally found peace." Behind me, I heard Ryan's low voice. "Guess peace is easier to find when you don't have illegitimate kids showing up to your funeral." Nathan didn't stop him. He just sighed. I turned, meeting Ryan's smirk with silence. His kind thrived on reaction, and I refused to give him one. I walked away, but their laughter, low, cruel, shared between brothers who'd grown up together while I grew up alone, followed me all the way to the parking lot. When the crowd dispersed, I lingered by my truck for a while, watching the limousines roll out one by one. Nathan stood by the last car, talking with the family lawyer, Mr. Gray, a tall man with silver hair and a voice that always sounded rehearsed. Their conversation looked serious, papers exchanged, heads nodding. I wondered if that was about the will. I didn't know it then, but that moment was the beginning of everything. A few days later, an official-looking envelope arrived at my apartment. Inside was a letter printed on thick paper. Mr. Jack Beaumont, you are requested to attend the reading of the last will and testament of Mr. Charles Beaumont at the offices of Gray and Associates. Monday, 10 a.m. I must have read it 5 times. I wasn't expecting anything. Not a penny, not even acknowledgement. Still, I went. Maybe, deep down, I wanted to hear my father's name one last time in connection with mine. When I arrived at the law office, the receptionist's professional smile faltered for a second when she read my name, then recovered instantly. Please wait in the conference room, Mr. Beaumont. The others are already here. The others. Nathan and Ryan were sitting at a long mahogany table, both sipping coffee like they owned the place. Which, to be fair, they probably did. Nathan gave a curt nod. Ryan grinned. Well, if it isn't our surprise guest. You sure this isn't a mistake, Gray? Mr. Gray entered, carrying a folder. No mistake. Mr. Charles Beaumont included all his children. The room went still for a second. All right, said Nathan. Let's get this over with. Mr. Gray began reading. His voice was calm and deliberate. To my son Nathan Beaumont, I leave the main Beaumont estate, along with 51% of Beaumont Holdings. Nathan didn't react, but I saw the faint twitch of satisfaction in his jaw. To my son Ryan Beaumont, I leave the New York penthouses and the yacht Serenity. Ryan smiled. Knew it. Then the lawyer paused. For a heartbeat, the room felt colder. And to my son Jack Beaumont. Ryan coughed, half laughing. Here we go. I leave an envelope, held in trust. The silence was suffocating. Ryan leaned back, grinning. Maybe it's a coupon. Nathan smirked. Or his unpaid parking tickets. Mr. Gray slid a small, worn envelope across the table toward me. It looked so out of place among the expensive leather folders and polished furniture. I picked it up. My name was written in my father's unmistakable handwriting, faded but firm. The lawyer's eyes softened. Mr. Beaumont requested that this be given to you personally. I nodded, too numb to speak. Ryan whispered, Don't spend it all in one place. Nathan chuckled. Their laughter followed me out of the building, just like at the funeral. But this time, something inside me changed. I wasn't angry, just curious. Because I had a feeling that whatever was inside that small, dusty envelope wasn't meant for them to understand. The next morning, I woke up with that envelope still on my kitchen table. I hadn't opened it yet. I couldn't. It felt heavier than it looked, as if every unsaid word between me and my father was sealed inside. But curiosity has a way of gnawing at you until you give in. Before I could, though, the day of the official reading arrived. I'd already received my envelope at the office, but apparently, there were legal formalities to finalize, signatures, acknowledgments, and a few last words from the lawyer. The sky was gray again, like it had been on the day of the funeral. It almost felt symbolic, the world reflecting the dull ache of unresolved family ties. I parked my truck outside the towering glass building downtown. Beaumont Holdings occupied the top floors, and Gray and Associates, the family's law firm, had its office just below it. The closer I got to that elevator, the more I felt like an intruder stepping into someone else's kingdom. When I walked in, Nathan and Ryan were already there, both leaning against the windows overlooking the city. Nathan looked bored, his phone in hand, while Ryan spun a pen between his fingers, smirking the moment he saw me. Well, he said, if it isn't our long-lost brother. You sure you belong in this building, Jack? Guess we'll find out, I said. Nathan didn't look up. Let's just get this done. We have meetings to attend. Meetings? Right. I'd spent my morning fixing a customer's transmission, while they were juggling stock portfolios and boardrooms. Our lives couldn't have been more different. Mr. Gray entered the room, holding a thick folder. Gentlemen, he said. His tone was crisp, practiced, the voice of a man used to managing tension among powerful people. Thank you for coming. I know this is never an easy process. He sat down, opened the folder, and began. Per the wishes of the late Mr. Charles Beaumont, this meeting serves as the final confirmation of asset transfers as stated in his will. He adjusted his glasses and looked at Nathan first. To my eldest son, Nathan Beaumont, I leave the primary estate at 14, Crestwood Drive, the controlling shares of Beaumont Holdings and all associated rights therein. Nathan gave a small nod, as if he already knew. To my younger son, Ryan Beaumont, I leave the New York penthouses, the yacht Serenity, and the collection of vintage cars. Ryan's grin widened. About time I got the fun stuff. Mr. Gray paused then, the room falling still. I could feel their eyes on me even before he spoke. And to my son, Jack Beaumont. He hesitated. It wasn't a long pause, but it felt like the world stopped breathing. I leave an envelope, held in trust. Silence. A faint chuckle escaped Ryan. You serious? An envelope. Nathan smirked. Seems fair, considering. Mr. Gray continued, ignoring them. This envelope was left with instructions to be delivered directly to Mr. Jack Beaumont. Mr. Beaumont stated, quote, he will know what to do with it. I could hear the mockery behind me, but I stayed quiet. Mr. Gray slid the envelope across the polished table toward me. It was small, worn, its edges yellowed, my name written in that unmistakable handwriting. My father's, strong yet slightly shaky. I took it, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. Ryan leaned back in his chair, still grinning. Hey, maybe it's a thank you card. Nathan's voice was colder. Don't embarrass yourself, Jack. Dad took care of everyone according to their worth. I looked at him. Then I guess I got what I was worth to him. Ryan laughed under his breath, and Eleanor, seated in the corner, let out a sharp exhale, the kind meant to signal this conversation was beneath her. Mr. Gray closed the folder. That concludes the formal reading. The estate will now proceed with asset distribution as per Mr. Beaumont's instructions. If there are any disputes, they can be addressed through legal counsel. Nathan stood immediately. No disputes here. Ryan stretched. None for me either, unless Jack plans to fight us for that envelope. I pocketed it quietly. I'm good. Mr. Gray gave me a look, something between sympathy and curiosity, before adding, your father specifically requested that you read what's inside when you are alone. That detail caught me off guard. Alone. Nathan's voice broke the brief silence. Guess that means even in death, he knew where you belonged. I turned toward the door. Yeah, away from all this. And I walked out. Outside, the wind had picked up, carrying the first hints of rain. I didn't bother opening an umbrella. My hands were clenched around the envelope the whole walk to my truck. By the time I got inside, I felt something shift inside me. Anger, sadness, disbelief. I couldn't tell which. I thought about my father, about the rare times he'd shown up in my childhood. A birthday card here, a short visit there. Always the same distant smile, always the same phrase. I'm proud of you, son. But those words had always sounded like practice, not truth. As I drove home, I replayed the scene from the office again and again. The laughter, the smirks, the arrogance. They'd gotten the empire, the houses, the cars, the company. And I'd gotten a thin envelope. Still, there was something about it that wouldn't let me throw it away. My father wasn't the kind of man who did anything without purpose. That night, I sat at my kitchen table under the flickering light bulb, staring at it. My name, Jack, written in fading ink. I traced the letters with my thumb, remembering the rare times I'd seen him write something by hand. He always used that same fountain pen, the one he kept in his vest pocket. For the first time in years, I whispered out loud. What were you trying to tell me, Dad? Outside, rain tapped softly on the window. I took a deep breath and reached for the envelope knife. The paper tore easily. Inside, there was a folded sheet, yellowed at the edges, creased from years of being handled. I opened it slowly. A slip of paper fell out. It was a bank account number, and one line written underneath it in my father's handwriting. This is for the child who was never supposed to exist. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. What did that mean? Guilt? Regret? Some final insult disguised as sentiment? I stared at the words until they blurred. Whatever it was, I needed to know. And I would find out, even if it destroyed every last illusion I had left about who my father really was. That night, I couldn't sleep. The line kept echoing in my head. This is for the child who was never supposed to exist. It wasn't just the words. It was the way he'd written them, like a confession carved into paper. And that account number beneath it. I stared at it so long I memorized it. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. My father, Charles Beaumont, was a man of precision. He didn't make mistakes. Every move, every decision, every word was deliberate. So why leave me this? An account number. No explanation. No password. No instructions. Just a ghost of a sentence that felt like a curse. But I couldn't ignore it. By midnight, I was sitting in front of my old laptop at the kitchen table, the envelope beside me. Rain drummed softly against the window. The screen's blue light reflected off the tears I didn't realize were there. I opened my father's bank's online portal, one I hadn't used in years. I typed the number in carefully, hands shaking just slightly. For a second, the cursor blinked on the screen like it was mocking me. Then, access granted. My breath caught. The account existed. And it wasn't empty. The numbers filled the screen slowly, one digit at a time, until they formed a figure that made my heart slam against my ribs. $482 million. 482 million. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, looked again. The number didn't change. The balance sat there, glowing on the screen, $500 million just sitting in an account linked to my name. I felt dizzy. My first thought was, it can't be real. There had to be a mistake, a glitch, something. But then I saw it, the name on the account. Beneficiary, Jack Beaumont. Depositor, CB Private Trust, established 1986. The year I was born. The realization hit, like thunder. This trust, this fortune, had existed since my birth. He'd set it up decades ago, quietly, secretly. No one had known. Not Nathan. Not Ryan. Not even Eleanor. And now it was mine. I sat there for minutes, staring, trying to make sense of it. If my father had hidden this all along, why pretend I didn't matter? Why let me grow up scraping by while my brothers lived in mansions and private schools? I thought of every time I'd called him and he hadn't picked up. Every letter I'd sent that came back unanswered. Every birthday when a card never came. And now this. $500 million, locked away all these years, waiting for a son he never publicly claimed. This is for the child who was never supposed to exist. The words came alive again, sharper now, like they carried a story I didn't yet understand. I leaned back in my chair, trying to breathe through the storm inside me. Money didn't heal wounds. It didn't rewrite the past, but it raised 1,000 questions. Had my mother known? Was that why she'd always gone quiet when his name came up? Was I really the secret, the mistake he'd tried to hide? The next morning, I went to the bank in person. The clerk behind the desk, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, asked for my ID. Her expression changed the moment she typed in the number. She straightened slightly, glanced at her monitor, then back at me with a new kind of respect. "Mr. Beaumont," she said softly, "would you like to speak with the private account manager?" "Private account manager?" I repeated. "Yes," she said. "Your father appointed one, years ago." My heart skipped. "He's still here?" She nodded. "One moment, please." Minutes later, a man in a dark gray suit approached. Early 60s, silver hair, sharp gaze. He extended a hand. "Mr. Beaumont, I'm Edward Lang. I manage this trust for your father." I shook his hand, my voice barely steady. I didn't even know it existed. He gave a faint smile. That was intentional. We walked to a private office overlooking the city. He closed the door before sitting down. "Your father was a complicated man," he began. "I imagine you've realized that by now." I nodded, unsure what to say. "He created this trust the year you were born," Lang continued. "He instructed me to maintain it quietly. No withdrawals, no disclosures, not even to his legal family. Only you could access it, once you reached a certain age and met one specific condition." I frowned. "Condition?" Lang pulled out a thin folder and slid it across the table. Inside was a single sheet of paper with my father's handwriting again. Familiar, bold, deliberate. Release full access only after confirmation of the son's independence. He must never receive this as a handout. He must earn his own worth first. I felt my throat tighten. Lang continued softly. "He followed your life, Jack. Quietly but closely. Your business, your struggles, even the night you bought your garage. He waited until you no longer needed him to give you anything." I stared down at the letter, the words blurring through tears I couldn't hold back. All those years, all that silence. He hadn't forgotten me. He'd been watching. "Why?" I whispered. "Why keep me hidden? Why not just be my father?" Lang sighed. "There were reasons. One's tied to the family, the company, and your mother. I'm not sure it's my place to say, but I believe he carried guilt for the rest of his life." He paused, then added, "This wasn't just money, Jack. This was his apology. His way of saying you were never a mistake. I sat there, speechless. $500 million. And yet, the number didn't matter anymore. It was the message behind it that broke me open. For the first time since his death, I felt something close to peace, shaky, uncertain, but real. When I left the bank, the world looked different. The sun had finally broken through the clouds. People walked by, unaware that a man among them had just discovered his entire life had been rewritten. I stopped at a small park on the way home, sat on a bench, and stared at the sky. For years, I thought my father had abandoned me. But now I realized he'd been protecting me, maybe even from the world he built, the empire that had already poisoned my brothers. That night, I went home and placed the letter back in its envelope. Not out of anger anymore, but gratitude. He had given me something far greater than money. He had given me truth. And now it was up to me to decide what to do with it. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more, something my father's letter hadn't said. $482 million wasn't just guilt money. It was a message, a key. For days after visiting the bank, I kept replaying Edward Lang's words in my head. There were reasons, ones tied to the family, the company, and your mother. That sentence felt like a door left half open, and I needed to know what was behind it. 2 weeks later, I called Lang again and asked to meet. This time, he suggested somewhere quiet, an old private club in downtown Chicago, the kind of place where deals were made behind cigars and whiskey. When I arrived, he was already seated in a corner booth, a file folder beside his drink. "You found something, didn't you?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "Your father made me promise to protect certain records until after his death. I believe you have the right to see them now." He opened the folder, and the first thing I saw was a photograph, black and white, dated 1985. My father stood beside a young woman, smiling in a way I'd never seen before. She wasn't Eleanor. She was my mother. Her name was written on the back. Anna Miller, July 1985. My chest tightened. She looked radiant, free, her hand on my father's arm like they belonged to another world, one untouched by the Beaumont name. Lang pushed more papers forward, legal documents, company transfers, contracts, letters. As I flipped through them, a story began to form, one darker and more complicated than I could have imagined. In 1985, before his marriage to Eleanor, my father had been in love with Anna Miller, my mother. She was a journalist, brilliant and outspoken. She'd written an exposé on corporate corruption that nearly ruined one of Beaumont Industries' early partners. What started as professional respect turned into an affair, a dangerous one. Because at the time, my father was engaged to Eleanor Van Crest, daughter of a powerful senator whose family money funded much of Beaumont's empire. When Anna discovered she was pregnant, my father panicked. If the Van Crests found out, the engagement would be over, and with it, his access to the political power that helped build his business. So he made a choice, a cowardly one. He begged Anna to keep the baby secret, to protect him, to protect the company, to protect the future. Lang paused before saying softly, "Your mother refused at first. But then, something changed. I believe she saw what the Beaumont family was capable of if crossed." He slid over another document. It was a police report, or rather, a redacted version of one. Anna Miller had been injured in a car accident 2 months before I was born. Her brakes had failed on a steep road in Wisconsin. The file had been closed as mechanical failure. But Lang looked me straight in the eye and said, "That car was serviced by a company owned by the Van Crest family." My blood went cold. He continued, "After that, she agreed to disappear. Charles bought her a small house outside Milwaukee and funded her medical care. In exchange, she promised never to speak his name publicly, and the child," he hesitated, "you, would remain off all legal records connected to the Beaumont estate." I leaned back, the room spinning. All my life, I'd wondered why my mother refused to talk about him, why she'd never even let me mention the name Beaumont. Now I understood. She wasn't ashamed. She was protecting me. But why leave me the money? I asked, my voice shaking. If he was so scared of the truth getting out, why risk everything by giving me $500 million? Lang's eyes softened. "Because your mother died, keeping his secret. And I think it broke him." He reached into the folder again and handed me a sealed envelope. Older, brittle with age. My father's handwriting again. This time, the envelope was marked. "For Jack. To be opened when he is ready to know everything." I opened it carefully. Inside was a single letter. "Jack, you were never supposed to be a shadow. But I made you one, and that is my greatest sin. I built an empire on alliances, power, and fear. But your mother showed me what real courage looked like. She refused to trade truth for comfort. I didn't understand that until it was too late. This trust is not a reward, it's redemption. It holds what I took from others and what I owe to her memory. There is one final key, Edward will know. Follow it, and you'll see where the rest of the story begins. Your father, Charles Beaumont. Lang handed me a small metal key from his pocket, attached to a faded tag that read, Locker 317, Safe Vault Storage. My hands trembled. What's in there? Lang sighed. He never told me. Only said it was something that would explain everything. I stared at the key for a long moment. Then I pocketed it. That night, I drove straight to the storage facility. The place was old, industrial, gray, tucked under an overpass. The attendant checked my ID, hesitated at the name, then led me down a dim corridor lined with metal doors. When the lock clicked open, my heart was pounding so loud I could hear it echo. Inside was a single black briefcase. Nothing else. I placed it on the floor, flipped the latches open, and lifted the lid. Inside were three things: a USB drive, a small leather notebook, and a single photo, my father standing beside a man I recognized instantly. Senator Richard Vancrest, my stepmother's father. On the back of the photo, written in my father's unmistakable handwriting, were 5 chilling words. He killed her. Protect the truth. I froze, every muscle in my body locking up. The pieces snapped together, the silence, the accident, the secrecy. My father hadn't just hidden me out of shame. He'd hidden me out of fear. And now, somehow, even from the grave, he was asking me to finish what he couldn't. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more, something my father's letter hadn't said. $482 million wasn't just guilt money. It was a message, a key. For days after visiting the bank, I kept replaying Edward Lang's words in my head. There were reasons, ones tied to the family, the company, and your mother. That sentence felt like a door left half open, and I needed to know what was behind it. 2 weeks later, I called Lang again and asked to meet. This time, he suggested somewhere quiet, an old private club in downtown Chicago, the kind of place where deals were made behind cigars and whiskey. When I arrived, he was already seated in a corner booth, a file folder beside his drink. You found something, didn't you? I asked. He nodded slowly. Your father made me promise to protect certain records until after his death. I believe you have the right to see them now. He opened the folder, and the first thing I saw was a photograph, black and white, dated 1985. My father stood beside a young woman, smiling in a way I'd never seen before. She wasn't Eleanor. She was my mother. Her name was written on the back. Anna Miller, July 1985. My chest tightened. She looked radiant, free, her hand on my father's arm like they belonged to another world, one untouched by the Beaumont name. Lang pushed more papers forward, legal documents, company transfers, contracts, letters. As I flipped through them, a story began to form, one darker and more complicated than I could have imagined. In 1985, before his marriage to Eleanor, my father had been in love with Anna Miller, my mother. She was a journalist, brilliant and outspoken. She'd written an exposé on corporate corruption that nearly ruined one of Beaumont Industries' early partners. What started as professional respect turned into an affair, a dangerous one. Because at the time, my father was engaged to Eleanor Vancrest, daughter of a powerful senator whose family money funded much of Beaumont's empire. When Anna discovered she was pregnant, my father panicked. If the Vancrests found out, the engagement would be over, and with it, his access to the political power that helped build his business. So he made a choice, a cowardly one. He begged Anna to keep the baby secret, to protect him, to protect the company, to protect the future. Lang paused before saying softly, "Your mother refused at first. But then, something changed. I believe she saw what the Beaumont family was capable of if crossed." He slid over another document. It was a police report, or rather, a redacted version of one. Anna Miller had been injured in a car accident 2 months before I was born. Her brakes had failed on a steep road in Wisconsin. The file had been closed as mechanical failure. But Lang looked me straight in the eye and said, "That car was serviced by a company owned by the Vancrest family." My blood went cold. He continued, "After that, she agreed to disappear. Charles bought her a small house outside Milwaukee and funded her medical care. In exchange, she promised never to speak his name publicly, and the child, he hesitated, you, would remain off all legal records connected to the Beaumont estate. I leaned back, the room spinning. All my life, I'd wondered why my mother refused to talk about him. Why she'd never even let me mention the name Beaumont. Now I understood. She wasn't ashamed. She was protecting me. But why leave me the money? I asked, my voice shaking. If he was so scared of the truth getting out, why risk everything by giving me $500 million? Lang's eyes softened. Because your mother died, keeping his secret, and I think it broke him. He reached into the folder again and handed me a sealed envelope. Older, brittle with age. My father's handwriting again. This time, the envelope was marked. For Jack. To be opened when he is ready to know everything. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single letter. Jack, you were never supposed to be a shadow. But I made you one, and that is my greatest sin. I built an empire on alliances, power, and fear. But your mother showed me what real courage looked like. She refused to trade truth for comfort. I didn't understand that until it was too late. This trust is not a reward, it's redemption. It holds what I took from others and what I owe to her memory. There is one final key, Edward will know. Follow it, and you'll see where the rest of the story begins. Your father, Charles Beaumont. Lang handed me a small metal key from his pocket, attached to a faded tag that read, Locker 317, Safe Vault Storage. My hands trembled. What's in there? Lang sighed. He never told me. Only said it was something that would explain everything. I stared at the key for a long moment. Then I pocketed it. That night, I drove straight to the storage facility. The place was old, industrial, gray, tucked under an overpass. The attendant checked my ID, hesitated at the name, then led me down a dim corridor lined with metal doors. When the lock clicked open, my heart was pounding so loud I could hear it echo. Inside was a single black briefcase. Nothing else. I placed it on the floor, flipped the latches open, and lifted the lid. Inside were three things. A USB drive, a small leather notebook, and a single photo, my father standing beside a man I recognized instantly. Senator Richard Vancrest, my stepmother's father. On the back of the photo, written in my father's unmistakable handwriting, were 5 chilling words. He killed her. Protect the truth. I froze, every muscle in my body locking up. The pieces snapped together, the silence, the accident, the secrecy. My father hadn't just hidden me out of shame. He'd hidden me out of fear. And now, somehow, even from the grave, he was asking me to finish what he couldn't. I sat in my truck for nearly an hour after leaving the storage facility, the briefcase beside me like a bomb waiting to go off. The words on that photograph kept burning through my mind. He killed her. Protect the truth. Senator Richard Vancrest, my stepmother's father, the man who'd built the political machine that fueled the Beaumont Empire. If my father's note was right, then my mother's accident wasn't an accident at all. I couldn't breathe. It felt like the ground beneath my life was shifting. Everything I'd believed about my family, about who I was, about what was true, unraveling thread by thread. When I finally got home, I opened the briefcase again. The USB drive looked ordinary, but when I plugged it into my laptop, a folder popped open titled Proof. Inside were dozens of files, scanned documents, audio recordings, transaction logs, and one video file labeled Final Statement. My fingers hovered over the mouse for a moment before I clicked play. The video opened with my father sitting behind his desk. He looked older, thinner than I remembered, tired in a way that money couldn't fix. Behind him, the Beaumont crest gleamed on the wall. He stared straight into the camera. If you're seeing this, he said quietly, it means I'm gone, and my son has found the key. His voice cracked slightly on the word son. I'd never heard him sound like that before. Jack, I'm sorry. For everything. For the silence. For the lies. For the years you spent wondering why I wasn't there. I wanted to protect you from the truth, but in doing so, I became part of the very corruption I once swore to destroy. He took a breath, rubbed his temples, then continued. The Beaumont fortune, all of it, is built on a foundation of blood and secrets. Your grandfather's company, Vancrest Energy, partnered with me in the late 70s. They funded our early projects, but in return, they demanded political loyalty and silence. When your mother discovered evidence of their offshore accounts and illegal environmental contracts, She tried to expose them. His eyes flickered with pain. I thought I could protect her by staying quiet. But silence only fed their power. The night her brakes failed, I knew. I knew what they'd done. But I had no proof, only suspicion. And I was too much of a coward to confront them. He looked straight into the lens then, almost into me. When you were born, I swore I'd make it right. But the Vancrests watched everything I did. I created the trust in secret under a false holding company, so that if anything ever happened to me, you'd have the means to finish what your mother started. He leaned closer, his expression hardening. Richard Vancrest didn't just take her life. He took my soul. He made me build an empire to hide his sins. But I kept the evidence, hidden, until now. The USB drive you found holds everything. Transactions, correspondence, signed documents tying Vancrest energy to fraud, bribes, and the cover-up of your mother's death. He paused, swallowed hard. If you expose them, you'll destroy everything I built, everything they worshipped. But if you stay silent, they win again. The choice is yours, son. Just know this. You were never a mistake. You were my redemption. Then, the screen went black. I just sat there, staring. The silence afterward felt heavy, almost holy. My father, the man I'd hated for years, had spent his life trying to atone. And now, that burden was mine. The folder on the USB contained everything he'd said. Bank transfers, shell company records, even letters between Senator Vancrest and government officials. It was enough to bring down an empire. But it also meant bringing hell onto myself, and onto the only family I had left. Nathan and Ryan might have treated me like dirt, but they were still my brothers. If this came out, their inheritance, their reputations, their entire lives would crumble. Was I really ready to do that? I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I drove aimlessly through the city, replaying every memory. Every time I'd seen my father on TV shaking hands with politicians, every whispered insult from my brothers, every quiet night when my mother stared out the window and said nothing. By dawn, I found myself parked outside the Beaumont estate, the mansion where it all began. I hadn't planned on going there, but something pulled me toward it, like gravity. The gates were open. Security must have recognized the name on my license plate. Or maybe fate had simply decided it was time. Inside, everything looked the same: polished marble floors, paintings of ancestors staring down with cold pride. I walked through the halls until I found Nathan in the study, pacing on the phone. He froze when he saw me. "What the hell are you doing here, Jack?" he snapped. I didn't answer. I just set the briefcase on his desk and opened it. When he saw the photo of Senator Vancrest, his face paled. Then I showed him the video. For 10 minutes, he said nothing, just watched as our father confessed everything. When it ended, he turned toward me slowly. "You're lying," he whispered, though his voice trembled. "I wish I was," I said. He looked away, eyes darting between the screen and the floor. "If this gets out, it'll ruin us." "Maybe it should," I said quietly. "Maybe that's the point." He slammed his fist on the desk. "You think destroying the family fixes anything? It kills everything he built." I stared at him. He didn't build it, Nathan. They did. On lies. On blood. On her death. His jaw clenched, his voice breaking. "You don't understand. You weren't here." "You're right," I said. "I wasn't. Because they made sure I didn't exist." For a moment, the room was silent. Then Nathan lowered his eyes. "What are you going to do?" I closed the briefcase, stood up, and said the only truth I had left. "I'm going to finish what he started." That night, I sent the files anonymously to 3 major news outlets. It didn't take long. Within 48 hours, headlines exploded across every network. Beaumont Vancrest Empire exposed. Corruption, cover UPS, and murder allegations. The empire fell faster than anyone expected. Senator Vancrest resigned in disgrace. Federal investigations launched overnight. And my brothers, well, they vanished from the spotlight entirely. For the first time in my life, the Beaumont name meant something real. Not power, not money, but truth.